even though they know that ultimately that's going to move to something which is more global than it is today. But that process, it's the transition that they're afraid of, because they recognize that if there was a financial collapse of a major industrial nation's currency, we are, as a world, going to see something that far outweighs what happened in the Great Depression. And there would be literally billions of people displaced, and hundreds of millions of people would starve to death. They are not nearly as rigid as I thought they would be in their thinking. In fact, I found most of the economists of central banks actually very applauding of what we were trying to do, and wanting to do many of these things themselves, and many of them having written academic papers. I mean, if you look at the economists of the macro economists of the world, 70% of them believe that going to a single currency in every nation was a mistake, for example. But they can't fix it. And the reason they can't fix it is it's a type 2 complex system, which means predictions about the system actually affect the behavior of the system, not just starting conditions, and not just inputs. So what this means is they're deathly afraid of a major news article being written in such a way that people panic or think something is going to happen that will cause the current system to collapse, and they have to prop it up. Privately, they're very interested in change. Publicly, they are very against it. That was a surprise to me. Another major thing that was a surprise was banks. I've been able to speak with some CEOs of really big banks. And some of the things that were shocking were, first, they already believe they've lost payments. In fact, they don't want it. KYC AML produces so much risk for them that the only payments they want are international foreign exchange, and they believe that that business will be gone in 5 years. So they don't want it. The second thing that shocked me is they don't make any money on lending. That's not where they see their future is, and with the exception of lending to subprime mortgages or subprime loans for cars and things like that, credit cards, things of that nature, that's where they're making their money right now. And they recognize that they're not going to be able to be in that space in 5 years. That 5-year number kept coming up when I was talking to them. But what they ask people like me is, what's our role in the future? Is our role, are we going to be like just gone? And because if I am, I got to disclose that to my shareholders, and I got to put that in my public disclosures. So, or do you think there's a role? And I do believe there's a role for banks. I do think that there are things that banks do relatively well. They've done a lot of bad things, but they've done some other things relatively well. Someone's going to need to be custodials in a system like this. Banks don't like to be custodials, but it's going to be a lot of money. A lot of money will be made there. They are relatively good at helping average citizens understand complex financial situations, and they provide relatively unbiased, counsel in that regard. They're pretty good at it. My mother is never going to use an electronic Bitcoin wallet. She likes going to the bank. She goes on the weekend and sits down and has a cup of coffee and talks to her banker and gets her $200 spending money every week. She doesn't want to lose that personal connection and relationship. Banks are actually pretty good at keeping secrets, and they've developed electronic secrets. They've developed a lot of infrastructure to do that. There have not been very many banks hacked and money stolen to the degree there has, with exchanges. And so these are ways that we see things changing. So I think what's needed is a dialogue with people, to talk to them about how do we make these changes, and we have to talk to the people in power today and not be afraid of them.
I think that having these conversations across disciplines and across fields is very much why we bring together systematic change conversations. There are within this room people who represent multiple perspectives on this. In the spirit of extending this further, are there other questions that folks would like to ask or comments? I see a hand raised.